Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman. I'm the streamer for this evening, and then this is my stream. It's about working on a SaaS application. That's a software as a service. If you're not familiar with that, we're working on a Django app, which is the popular web framework in the Python ecosystem. And specifically, we work on College Conductor, which is one of my side projects. Domain's not super important for what we go over because we spend most of our time doing coding. So feel free to ignore the actual product. It is a real product. I had someone sign up for it by accident, thinking it was just a demo toy project. No, it's not. If you sign up, you will eventually be charged. So please don't do that unless you're actually a college admissions person. But I assume you're here to actually learn about some coding. And so what we're going to do tonight is continue on a project that I've been working on for this application. It is packaging up my app so that it's making deployment easier. Right now, my deployment process for this application runs through Ansible, and it runs a lot of tasks to make sure that the server where the website lives on DigitalOcean is up to date with the latest code and all that stuff. What I want to do is move a lot of that complexity to my continuous integration system so that deployment is super fast, low risk, and just a more seamless process. In order to do that, I'm moving to this model of taking all my code and pre-bundling it into a package. Last week, I thought I was going to use a tool called Platter to do this. But if you tune in, and like these things are posted on YouTube, so if you tune in there, you'll find that Platter doesn't actually work for Python 3. That's what we discovered. It's a Python 2 only library. So we looked around to see what were the other options that were available and came across this tool called Shiv. Let me see. I can bring up the documentation. I have it somewhere. Shiv is a project from LinkedIn. And what it does is it takes code and it bundles it up into what's known as a zip app, which is really a zip archive that is designed to work with the Python interpreter. So that's the goal, is to get this Shiv app built, make sure it works, and then integrate it into the continuous integration process, and then integrate it into the deployment process, so everything will go through. If you want to follow along, we have an issue that we're working from. This repository is all open so that you can see it. It's mblayman/conductor on GitHub. And if you want to chat, chat's open. Please be civil. If you want to follow me or ask me questions before, well, not before, obviously, but after the stream is over or during the stream, you can connect with me on Twitter. I also have a website. Both of those things are listed above, so you can follow me on those platforms at a different time. Or if you're watching here live, feel free to send me a follow on, or what's the right term on Twitch? I never remember. A follow, I guess, to make sure that you know when I'm streaming. Normally I stream at 9 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesdays. So let's jump into it with getting all that front matter out of the way. We're going to look at where we left off last time. And last time it seemed like we had a working app, a working Shiv app, and everything was great. It had Unicorn was running. It all seemed fantastic. So let's clear that up for a second. And the thing that we built, if you look at the terminal here, is this pyz file. That's the extension that zipapps use. And it is an executable. That's what my terminal is telling you in that red font color. You can see there's the executable bit set on the file. So what we can do is run it like so, and it will probably blow up because I realize it's missing a configuration setting. So let's try it again with the right configuration setting, which is the entry point to the application. And what you might notice is that it's using GUnicorn. GUnicorn is a web application framework in Python. It starts up and is listening on localhost 8080. So if we go over there, I don't actually think you can see my URLs, but localhost 8080 is there and the site is up. Great. It's all seemed to be working. So it seemed like last week this was successful. But I realized that I failed to do something in that test process. And what I failed to do was, if you look down in the corner here, you can see that this parentheses conductor. This means that my virtual environment that actually has all the packages that I need is running currently. I can do a pip list and I can see everything that I've installed in this virtual environment, which is quite a bit of pieces. So what happened was, after the stream was over, I thought, okay, I should run an actual test where the virtual environment is now deactivated. This is a much shorter list of things that are kind of installed at the system level. But it's the point is, it's not the set of packages that I need to run my app. So I had that, and then I tried to run my Shiv app again. And then I hit this fun little error that says populate isn't reentrant. I have no idea what this meant necessarily. Well, I mean, I do know what reentrant is all about. I didn't understand it in the context of this Django app. Basically, the idea is there's no amount of like recursion that's allowed to happen when Django is setting up its application. So populate is something that's getting all of the Django apps ready. And if you're not familiar with Django app structure, I feel like I cover this every time, but the overarching structure is you have a Django project, which is kind of the root thing, and you have apps, which are your components that live under them. And each of them has an opportunity to kind of boot itself up, get ready. And so this is the chunk of code that is running to make sure that each of the apps within the project is ready. And what happens is there's some locking that goes on. I dug into the code last week after the stream. There's some locking that happens here. And if that locking doesn't work out right, it throws this runtime error and says something has happened. This is trying to protect you from like a multi-threading scenario where two threads are going into this method at the same time. It's doing that sort of stuff, but that turns out that actually isn't what really happens in this case. When I got a debugger in there, and I'm not going to go through all this because it's kind of boring, but when I got a debugger in there and stepped through the code, what I actually saw was it was raising an import error during the app preparation step when it had entered this this area, and was throwing this import error. And maybe because of the way Shiv things are packaged, I'm not really sure, but it didn't show the import error. The import error got swallowed or kind of just made so you can't see it. And then this second one came up the next time it happened. So import error occurs, the code is allowed to continue rather than just abort and get out and say I can't do it. And when the code continues, problems have already occurred. So it goes into this populate function or method again, and then it hits this locking scenario where it says like you've already gone in here once, but you haven't actually completed it. So that's what's happening. Kind of weird, kind of complicated, but that's what's going on. So it turns out the thing that I'm missing, and we can, what should I do? Yeah, let's reactivate the virtual environment and do a pip list. The thing that I'm missing here is this, the bindings for the Postgres database, the Python bindings for it essentially. And this is critical because my application uses PostgreSQL to do all of its SQL stuff, and it needs a database driver in order to connect to it. And so what I realized is that in my my code settings, we can dig in here and we can see that I'm actually using Ansible to install PsychoPG, I think is usually how it's called, PsychoPG2, straight from the Ubuntu repository. So because it's coming from the Ubuntu repository, it means that I did not put it in my Requirementstxt file. So if we search for the same thing here, it's not in this list. This is all alphabetically sorted, so it's just not here. So that's the real core of the problem, that this package is missing because Ansible, and usually it was set to install it outside of that flow using Ubuntu's default packages or prepackaged stuff, and that's not going to work because in this zip app flow I want to have everything there. So in theory, I guess if I put this on my server, since this is a package that's installed at the Ubuntu, the operating system level, I suppose this could work, but I don't want to rely on it. What I really want to do is make sure that my requirements file has all of my packages and not just some of them. So we're going to fix that up. That's the starting point for tonight. And I've noted that here. So that's the backstory for what's going on with this bullet here. That's what I found when I tried to run this in a deactivated mode. So in order to fix that up, I have to deal with some differences in operating systems. This is the challenge that comes. I'm not using Vagrant or anything to run my regular development environment. I'm using Mac OS, and Mac OS has some pre-built psycopg2 binary that you can use, and it's not going to work on my server because it's Mac OS and that's a Linux environment. But I had to deal with that locally for my local development. So what you can see in my requirements include file is that psycopg2 is actually missing from this list. So I don't want to put it here because the macOS stuff still needs to operate the same way it was with its binary packages. So what I really want to do is create a new requirements include file that is the same format as a requirements include, but just it's going to be the one package. And I'm going to call it, what am I going to call it? Let's call it requirements prod include. And this will all make sense together. I'm going to basically compose these pieces together and generate one requirementstxt to put it all into one thing that can then build the app in its entirety. So over here we've got psycopg2, and I suppose this is where we need to check out like what version is actually available on PyPI. I'm sure there are faster ways to do this, but this is reasonably fast. What is this thing? psycopg3. Is somebody else making that? I think that's some other scammy thing. Or it looks weird. So this is the package that people care about. And we might need to check. I don't know if Django itself has requirements of which version of psycopg2 it has to rely on. I don't recall seeing that. So what I'm going to do is just cross my fingers for now that if we get the latest, it'll work out okay. And so we want to say 282 to pin it. And that's going to be the requirements prod file. And now we need to make our new requirementstxt file, which will have all of the packages. And I guess you all need a little bit more context. So here's what's happening when we build this Shiv app today. We clean out some old stuff, and we take all of our requirements that we care about, and we dump them into this dist directory. That's what the target parameter or flag is doing here. And also note the dot here. I did some packaging work on my actual Django app, and the dot is saying also install the local thing here, the local setup.py. Python gets a little circular about all this stuff, but it all comes together in one unit in the end. So we did our local packaging with the Python app here, and we are combining that with our external dependencies with the requirementstxt. And what I'm saying is missing right now is that the psycopg2 in requirementstxt is not there. And so we need to build that new version that includes that. So what I'm going to do is make a make target that will do all the stuff that we care about. Because I'm going to forget this command. It's going to be a couple of things that we're going to need to use. I'm using a tool called pip compile, which is what that requirements include is. And so you can say, I think I had the documentation up a minute ago. You can say the output file that you want. Where are you? There it is, output file. So you say output file, and we're going to use the one that we had. requirementstxt. And now we're going to pass it in two things, where it previously was just one. So it's going to be requirements.include, which is all of my standard packages that apply for either environment. And then we're going to throw in this requirements prod include as well, which should give us, because pip tools can take multiple include files and put them all together in one big thing. So if we save that as our make file, and we come over here and say make compile, hopefully it does the right thing. Yeah, you can see it's kind of dumping that out there. It also put it on standard out, which is, I'm checking if that's what we want. Maybe it does both when you use the output file thing, so that you can see the changes. Okay, and it looks like the only addition, CyclePG2 must have no dependencies, because the only addition to the requirements txt file was that one package. And it modified how the thing was built. Cool. Feel good about that. So we have this stuff, and it's now time to try and rebuild our package. So the script I showed you earlier that was doing all this cleaning and pip installing and then running the Shiv command was called package shell. So let's rerun that. It's going to take a second, and because it's going to go do the pip stuff, try and pull all that down, and put in all that stuff into a dist directory, and then go through the package building. It doesn't take super long unless things are being weird, like network issues are happening. And most of the stuff is cached, so there's not a lot to download here. So this is where we might run into trouble. I don't know. Oh good, it seemed to build correctly. I was afraid. So when we're now installing from PyPI, we're you could see the step where it was building the binary distribution wheel. So locally my Mac must already have the necessary Postgres development libraries to actually build properly here. I imagine if I was missing those things, it would have said, hey, wait a minute, you can't build this because you're missing some stuff. But the true test will be, does this thing actually work? So if we look at the PYZ file, we can see that its touch time is, right now, 9:20 locally. And the test is, can we deactivate the virtual environment and run the PYZ file and see if it runs? That's the true test. Ah, dang it. Okay. So you are going to have to see the debugging that I did before, because there must be something else that's missing, or some other problem along the way. And this is a bit of an annoying process, but I didn't know how else to do it. So where can we go? We need to go to the entry point. And so the entry point for this thing is conductor main. And so we're running Python 3. So let's get fancy and use the new debugger statement. If you've been doing Python for a long time, you might have this kind of statement. Like I use it so much that I've got a shortcut to type all that out. But Python 3.6, I think, maybe 3.7, I don't remember which version, added this new debugger thing, this function, which in the default scenario is actually just doing all of this stuff, importing PDB and calling PDB set trace. But if you are have a different debugger configured, it'll use that instead. So it's kind of this nice generic thing. It's also shorter, and it's not so like, if you are new to the language, like this is totally foreign looking. But I think this should work. Python, just trying debugger. So, and if it doesn't work, we'll go to the trusty old PDB. So we're going to rebuild this thing. Again, we'll have to wait for a minute. And then we're going to step through at the debugger and figure out what's blowing up, because it's swallowing some exception again. And what's going on now? Oh, I'm not in a Python 3 context. Okay, try again. So it's swallowing some exception that we can't see, and it's a little annoying. I'm hoping that doesn't become like a problem with Shiv apps or something, that the way that they're packaged together causes that. I doubt it. Maybe it's just there's some setup stuff that we have to get over before this will work. So we're going to run this the same way that we were running it before, but now that the debugger statement is in there, it'll just stop. And what I like about Shiv apps is it's not a Docker container. You're not running it in some Docker daemon in some container context. No, it's just like Python code that's been put into an archive and then extracted. So it's no different really at runtime from modules that you get from PYC files that are already unzipped in other places. So let's try it. Ah, rats. Okay. I guess we'll have to try PDB. That's fine. So I might be on Python. Well, let's find out while we're waiting for that to build. Python debugger. It's so new that, oh, that's because I totally got it wrong. It's not debugger. I'm sorry, I misled you all. It's breakpoint. Well, there you go. It's so new that I don't even remember what it is. And it's a 3.7 feature. So I want to say that I'm actually running 3.6. Is that true? Python version? No, 3.7. Okay. So it should have worked if I had typed the right thing. But like I said, it's equivalent to PDB set trace. So we're in the same stuff. So now we're here, and we're going to step into the setup and just kind of go through stuff for a while. Okay, now we're entering into populate. Well, got through it that time. That's not good, because now we're in this weird zone where it seems like if I ran it without the debugger, it errored, but if I run it with the debugger, it doesn't error. That's really not a good place to be. Let's check localhost to see if it's working as we think. Well, the good news is it appears to work. Yeah, well, that's cool. So we got to figure out why. Maybe we'll just give it another shot. Maybe it hadn't actually picked up last time I built it. Maybe it didn't actually pick up the change to include psychopg2. So let's try it again. And if you have any questions about this process or what I'm doing or motivations around it, please let me know. here to answer your questions as well as work on some fun projects. So I'm happy to take any questions if you've got them. And I guess I should highlight where we're going after this works. So if we prove that this works, we get it going. Try it again. Come on. Hey, cool. All right, so maybe there's just something stale in there before. I'm going to go with that because I don't like the non-deterministic thinking of it'll fail sometimes and succeed other times. So this seems to be working. All right. Let me know if you have any questions, CLI. I'm happy to answer. So this seems to be working. Let's refresh to just to make sure. Cool. So that's encouraging. So, but we have to pause and think about this. So what I built, like if I took this PYZ zip archive thing and deployed it to my Linux machine right now, or I definitely would not deploy it to production, but deployed it to my staging machine, which is a Vagrant image that runs Linux, it would blow up, I suspect. And the reason it would blow up is because there's different ABI compatibility issues, like the binary level differences between how Mac OS stuff is compiled versus how Linux is compiled. They're just not the same target. So it's very unlikely that that would work. So the way that we're going to get this to work in the target is to move this to continuous integration. And in my continuous integration environment, I used Circle CI, and it's using, as far as I know, an Ubuntu image to do the building. So if I'm building over there and can build the PYZ zip app over there, then I can take that zip app and try it on my Linux system. That's the next step. So the question becomes, well, how do we get that to the next stage? And my answer is that the thought process behind this was do the building over there, make sure that Circle CI can do it successfully and actually generate the thing, and then store it on AWS. So I want to use Amazon S3 to actually do the storage of these archives. They're not huge. I think it was like 29 megabytes, which when you consider that includes 23. That includes all of my images, all of my CSS, like all that stuff is rolled up in this process. The fact that those things are there, so it makes sense that it would be of that size. The point is, like, putting that amount of data on S3 is kind of like laughable for Amazon. I think I could do hundreds of these deploys and still rack up pennies a month in charge from storage on S3, because S3 is meant for gigabytes, terabytes, petabytes of data. Like it's just meant to handle a lot. So that's the flow. So the things I don't know how to do right now is I don't know right off the top of my head how easy this will be to get Circle CI to build this thing. I don't know how easy it is to connect Circle CI to my Amazon account and do an actual upload to an S3 bucket. So we're going to have to do a fair number of things before this will work. I'm encouraged by where we're at though, so I think what I'm going to do is check out the pieces that remain, everything that went along at this, and most of this section a success. So I think we fixed this, and it appeared to work. Oh, one thing I didn't like about this process, when I called this thing, you might have noticed this business. So this --config gunicorn.py, those are my local development settings for macOS. So when I'm doing my local development, I also use gunicorn, and it has these settings. So like I have a local generated private key to do like fake HTTPS basically in my browser. So even though it's not, I don't know that, can you see my, I think my top bar covers up my title stuff, but here, if we look at the stuff that I have open, you can see it's got this like danger warning by the lock, just to point out that it's not a real cert for HTTPS, but it does allow you to like test out HTTPS stuff, and you just have to, as a developer, it'll say like, are you sure you want to proceed? Which I'm guessing of your time on the web, you've encountered some of those things along the way. So that's what's in this settings file, and I also have it to like automatically reload and stuff like that. So these are the settings that are going in here. These are not the settings that I'm going to want long-term for my production server. But I'm trying to think about the best way to do this, because currently, like, I have to call it with some settings, because if I just try and call it by itself, it blows up and says, yeah, no application. So I think like this thing right here is the minimal piece that's needed, that's never going to change. And what I'm wondering if I should do is if I should try and bake that into the app. I feel like I should, and I'm just trying to think of the best way to do it, because there was a way documented in the Shiv documentation. So last week we went through and I found this deploying Django app stuff, and they did this, and I kind of groaned a little bit when I saw this, but perhaps it's okay. So what I might want to do is still, and the reason I didn't like this is because it's really mangling the system arguments, the command line arguments that are passed into the app. It totally clobbers them here. It's like saying, forget whatever was in there and use these. I'm guessing they put that here for like to make an effective demonstration for the documentation. So I think what I will do is take sysargv and try to append the app name. Where'd it go? This guy, conductor whiskey application. I think just by appending it, then it will still allow any command line arguments that we pass to it. So if I want to change some stuff for production versus my dev stuff, I can do that. But then I won't have to say where the application is every time. So let's try that really quickly, see if we can get that to work. Where would that be? That would be in the conductor main file. And they did it right before the whiskey run. So let's import sys and do sys argv append, and it's conductor. And if you're not familiar with gunicorn, this gunicorn is a WSGI application. WSGI is Web Server Gateway Interface, and it's a protocol for allowing the different Python web application servers to be compatible with each other. So it's the minimal interface that everybody can adhere to, and if you work with this interface, then you're going to work. So Django makes a WSGI app, and we can check it out in the WSGI file. So part of their being a web framework is to actually generate a WSGI app so that they can plug into an application server. And so they have this core utility that makes the application. That application then plugs into gUnicorn, and gUnicorn says, okay, I know how to run this. Let's run it. So, but in order to get this all to come together, you have to tell gUnicorn what is your entry point. It's basically like, what is your main method of your whole app? So this, by appending this to the argv, it should be enough to indicate to gUnicorn what the app is. Let's try. Let's see if I'm correct. We're going to run our package script again. I'll take another minute to get that done. And then this time, if this is successful, we should be able to run the exact same thing we ran before, but just add on --config.gunicorn.py. That way, one less thing to specify. And it just makes sense to do that, because if you think about a binary like ls, like anything really, anything that's a binary, I don't have to say think of ls like a container and then say main as the entry point to my ls command. That just doesn't make any sense. So it is logical to try and remove that from consideration. Okay, so we're going to try conductor pyz big unicorn. See if it goes this time. Well, it didn't complain. That's promising. And try and view the site. Yeah, cool. That worked. Great. So let's stop there and add that to the fray. So now everything that we've got, I've got a new ability to make my new requirementstxt when I need to with just a make command. And we've got our app building properly because we included psychopg2. And yeah, it added that to requirementstxt. So let's commit this. Let's see. Run Shiv app with psychopg2. And this is for number 377. Yeah, ta-da, hooray. And I pointed this out a number of times. This is a lot of my motivation for why I'm doing this. So before you freak out that I'm putting bad stuff on the internet, this is all, I've checked this out before. It's all in my package JSON stuff. So if I was running a JavaScript app, I might be a lot more concerned about this and want to fix it right away. But GitHub does this scan for you, helpfully, and tries to look for like vulnerable packages and stuff. And if I can get as much of that off of my production server, then it reduces the amount of potential exploits that are available on my server for a bad guy to try and attack, or bad person. So that's what I'm trying to avoid. Like, even though, you know, my toolchain for building JavaScript might have some vulnerabilities, if it's not actually on the production machine, who cares? Like, someone can't really affect it that way. And you know, the only place that it would run would be in Circle CI in a container that's fully isolated and secure. So it reduces the risk from package vulnerabilities by a lot if we can extract it from the place where stuff is being deployed. Okay, so next step, we got to figure out, so we made it work. Cool. We need to do this thing of generating the tarball on CI. So let's log into Circle. Running my stuff right now, which is cool. And I guess we didn't really need to log in because I have a Circle CI configuration file. That's where all the work is really done for that. So let's bring that up. Circle has this, I'll just put it this way, I like their older format better. It was a lot clearer. They switched maybe a couple years ago now to this format where you have to, each stage of your process is like specifying a new image to use. And it's a little tedious, to be blunt. I'm sure it's super flexible, and I'm sure a lot of people love it, but I find it irksome. So, but here's the, actually let's start at the bottom because that's where it makes the most sense. So the way Circle CI works is you have this workflow, and the workflow is, in my case, it's called test bless. Bless was actually a name from my old job that I copy pasted over, and there was a bless script to, don't worry about it. It's an artifact from a long time ago. I should probably just rename the thing because it doesn't make any sense anymore. But this is like the pipeline of things that happen, and they call them jobs. And you can see that this is, it reads a little funny, but it would have been nicer to just like give a list in YAML, but they didn't do it that way because it's actually a graph. So in my case, I'm running something linearly by saying you first have to do build py, and then you have to do lint py, and then test py, and like the lint py requires the build py, so you can see how it's a chain. So I want to build a package. I want to run a new job, and that job is going to do the actual package building, the PYZ building, the Shiv thing, and it is going to do it in a new stage. So what should we call it? And what else can I highlight about this? Because this doesn't look super clear. Like, why do I have the -py? So again, I pilfered from my previous employer, like how we did it there, with the intention of like maybe someday I would run some JavaScript tests and that kind of stuff. So the -py is just a name that, like, there'd be an equivalent -js for building JavaScript or linting JavaScript or testing JavaScript, all of those sort of things. But I never got around to needing those. So I've got these extra things. While we're in here, I want to rename this, rename the whole workflow. And this name it just doesn't resonate with me. So how about we just call it pipeline? I hope that's not a keyword of some kind. I could look that up if it becomes a problem. So we've got our pipeline of jobs now, which I think is a more accurate description. And I want to make a new package if it gets through here. So I'll call this new job, I'm going to call it package. And in case I get into a JavaScript feature, I'll just stick with the convention of adding -py. And we'll say that it requires test py. So it's like the last stage in the pipeline. And then we need to actually do it. So this thing is going to it's going to look a lot like this Docker thing, this this test py job, where it needs to specify a Docker image, in which case we're doing the Python 3.6 image here. And I'm doing 3.6 because my server has 3.6. Ooh, is that right? Might be important if we're like kind of building a binary. Well, shoot. Let's see. What version of Python are you? Well, okay, what version of Python 3 are you? Okay, good. It is 3.6. I was getting a little nervous that like I'd gone down this whole route and that Circle CI was not going to be in agreement. So this should still be okay. Catastrophe avoided. So we've got, we're going to rename this to package. And so the first thing you have to do is you have to specify which Docker image you want to build from. And this is a built-in step from Circle CI, which, if you can guess, is doing a git checkout. So it's doing a lightweight checkout. It's not doing a full clone of the repository. And at the start of this process, when I was building the Python, we are building it with oh, hold on a second. Just thinking. I see a conflict here. That's a problem. So let me get back to what I was saying. Sorry, I got derailed. So the build process to go through this, like it installs the dependencies into a virtual environment, which is what happens here. It tests if a virtual environment exists, and if not, it creates one. And then from that virtual environment, it installs all of its packages. And then it saves that as the cache that it can use later. And so then in the later steps, you restore the cache. And that's the kind of annoying part about the Circle CI jobs is like the stuff you build in one doesn't carry over because they're all in containers. So you have to like explicitly cache the things that you care about. And the things that I care about are these Python packages. So what we need to do is restore that cache, which brings in the cache pip directory and the VM directory that was created in that earlier build step. And what we're going to do in the command here is we're going to actually, I'll call it package Shiv app. And so there's some complications I see in this process because it's using the Python that's in this virtual environment, which is not necessarily what we want because the packaging step is just calling out to pip. So this is going to get tricky. That's okay. All right. Well, here's the other fun part about dealing with CI systems. You end up like going through this cycle of test what you think will work and then look at the build output and try it again because it doesn't work the first time. It rarely works the first time. Caveat that. Okay, so the command we really want to run is package. And let's do the stupid thing first and see how far it gets to kind of guide rather than guess, because we could guess of what it needs to do, but we can just say run this and see what happens. The other thing I noticed that I was pausing about earlier was that my requirements dev file, I forgot, it includes psychopg2, but that's not true anymore because my requirementstxt file has that pinned now, so I don't need that in there, I think. Yeah. So let's see what this does. We have this package py. We've renamed the test bless thing to pipeline. We've said that package py is dependent on test py succeeding. and that the thing that it's going to do is create the Shiv app. It seems like enough, right? All right, let's try it. So we'll be realistic. Attempt packaging Shiv in circle. Yeah. And that was, the number was 377, right? And the reason CI is annoying is because the process of actually running it is like you have to commit and push and check your mistake, commit, push, check your mistake, rather than having a much tighter feedback loop on your local machine of see your mistake, make some modifications, see your mistake, and just iterate quickly that way. This is a lot longer. Did I blow it up? No, cool. It renamed it to pipeline, so that's great. And I have not honestly been on the Circle CI UI in a while, so we'll have to see. My CI system thankfully is pretty quick. Only takes a couple of minutes, so we don't have to sit around and wait for forever. They have all sorts of new icons. What is this thing? Oh, okay. Good on them for making updates. All right, it's downloading stuff. Oh, you know what happened? The reason this step is taking longer this time is because I made a modification to that requirements dev file. So let's go back and look at the Circle CI file. So here's the important part. It does this checksum on the file, and it does a checksum on this other file. And Circle CI only restores the cache if it can't find, or if it can find this key. When I changed requirementsdev.txt, that checksum no longer was true anymore. So it didn't restore anything. So when it gets down to this step of installing stuff, it's generating a new virtual environment, is installing all of these packages from scratch because I have a change. In a scenario, which is most of the time, where I'm not upgrading packages, it flies through this step and takes just a couple of seconds because nothing's changed, so it can restore from the cache. The cache is just as good as it was, and it moves on to the next stage. But that's why that took so long. So now we're in the package py step, which is where we want to be. Oh, good, it failed. Well, not good, but we at least have something to look at. Shiv command not found. Okay. Oh, okay. I think I see what's going on. So, if you recall, I'm installing all of these things into a virtual environment, which I've named explicitly vn. And here you can see I'm using vn bin black, like I have to specify the bin directory to get to it. In our little package script, I don't do that. So I'm trying to decide if I want to make this something that I can run locally, like if I care, or if I just don't care. I probably don't care, but yeah, do I? No, I think I'm good with we're just going to go like this. So this means it's like no longer will run locally, but after I'm done with this, it shouldn't matter. Or if I ever need to test it out locally, I could do, I could delete that. So maybe there's a better way to do this. Let's say venv equals venv bin, like that. And now we'll put venv in front of it. So now if I want to test this locally, all I have to do is comment this guy out. So I guess a little trick. So that should work on circle because venv bin will be there, and find Shiv. And then I still have the capacity to test it locally if I need to. So let's see, they make Shiv available to CI. They're really persistent on that message. What's funny is when we started this, like when I first committed less than 30 minutes ago, it said 11. Now it says 13. Okay, thanks GitHub. So yeah, look, like here's pipeline. It's already through the build step because it didn't have to do anything there. It just cruised through it. Took 15 seconds. And here's where we literally sit around waiting for CI. All right. Hey, cool. It succeeded. I mean, I think it did. There's no output to tell you that it made it. So the question becomes, well, we just assume that it made it. Okay. So now what? Now what can we do? I guess if going back to the issue, we generated it. It's not a tarball anymore, so this is inaccurate. This was for when I was first going through this. This was going to be for platter, which did make a tarball, but now it's a PYZ is more accurate. So I think we generated it, but it's not quite to my liking, probably, because if you look at the format of this thing, it takes conductor PYZ and it just uses that as the name. And there's no notion of versioning on this. And this is going to be something that I want to be able to handle because I want the system to have a capacity to do like a quick rollback. So my final vision for the deployment is the deployment will go to S3 and say, what is the latest file in this Amazon S3 bucket? A bucket which I've specified will only store these Shiv zipapp executables. And when it finds that file, it's going to pull that down. And then I want my deployment process to do a symbolic link to something that is always consistently named in the deployment environment, but it will point to the specific version thing that I have generated. And the benefit of doing that is, like, let's say something really bad happened and I make a new one of these and I forget some dependency. I didn't test it on staging. There are a number of gates that I'm trying to like that I'd have to go through to like really mess myself up. But by having a bunch of steps that kind of guard, I make sure that I don't have these catastrophic failures, or at least minimize the chance. So, but in the event that I do have one of these failures where something has gotten through and there's something different about my production environment versus my staging, whatever, and I need to roll back, the quick way to do that is that if I have version A and version B of my executable on the production server, I can quickly go back to do the rollback by switching a symbolic link to point at the previous one, and then restart the server, and it'll just be like it, in theory, should be like it didn't happen. But in order to do that, I need to be able to point at different ones. So let's take a look at, sorry. So the naming of Python packages is like the package name, then dash, then a version number. And so I need a notion of a version number. And the way I want to do that, I think, is with Circle's built-in numbers. So Circle CI has a bunch of built-in environment variables, and I looked it up like last week, but build number, here they are. So there's built-in environment variables that you can use as part of any of your jobs, and they just exist, they have a value. And I think this is the one I want, because I don't need to get into semantic versioning and like 1.0.0 or 2.0. I don't care. I just need some monotonically increasing number. And since the build number is exactly that, like it just ran 545, I can do 546 next. I think I want to use this to guide what the package is named. So I want to use that at a couple of levels. The first level is in the setup.py file. There's a version number here for the package. And so I think what I want to do is say, what do I want to say? Well, let's import OS. We're going to pull it from the environment. That's what we're going to do. So we can say OS environ is, what was the name? Circle build num. Now you may notice that this is now, unless I define this, it's going to fail locally. So we can test all this out, but I essentially want the same pattern here. This is just a bash shell, so this becomes easier. Circle build num. By doing those two things, I should have, this is starting to get long, so let's wrap this like that. A little bit cleaner to see. So now we have a properly named package, which gets a monotonically increasing number, which is something that I can store in a variable. I probably should, because not long after this package, we will run an upload script that will take the thing. In fact, it may all just be here, all in the same script, because why not? So that's good. And now if I try and run this, I believe it'll fail. So we'll get, let's comment this out and try to run package. And it's going to fail with an environment error, key error, because that build circle build num is not going to be an environment variable. Yeah, okay. Okay. So that behavior is fine. That's what I expect. And maybe we can, what can we do? What I didn't like, we weren't able to see. Let's do another run command. I want to see the content. Like, I want to know that it actually made that thing. So show me the files. Command ls. Oops, that's the wrong area. Put it down here. So we're going to test if the packaging is creating correctly. And we're going to list out the files that we can actually visibly see that in Circle. And yeah. Now we're going to add versioning to packaging. So Circle's going to run through that and hopefully build us a version number or a package with a version number. And then we get down to bucket creation. So what should we do for that? Well, let's confirm that we have something to send. And then I think what I want to do before just jumping into it, maybe Circle has tooling, like maybe it's such a common thing to work with AWS that some of that tooling is built in or easily accessible. I don't know how hard this is going to be. Because at minimum, what do I need to provide? Like the Circle CI is going to need it's going to need some credentials to talk to AWS to actually even upload the artifact. But they might have smarter ways of doing this than I'm thinking. Oh, this is interesting. I'm not sure I like. Okay. Here's the other side effect of the way Circle changed their system, is that each of the jobs is given its own number. So like, if I'm building these packages, they're going to increase, it's going to jump by like 4 because I have 4 jobs for this one pipeline. Maybe there's another better name. Or maybe, I don't know. We could use other stuff too. We could use a SHA. We could use a bunch of things. Like, I guess it doesn't, and who cares? Does it matter that it's incrementing by more than 1 at a time? No. Okay. So let's check out the pipeline. Whoops, what'd I do? We messed it up. Oh, dang it. Spelled it wrong. Spelled it right in the bash script, but not here. Super. Better spelling. Okay. And I think before we get too far, so we'll probably end up stopping a little bit after, once we get this confirmation that this build is going correctly and we see a build version number, probably wrap up for the night, and then we'll think about I'll do my homework so that you guys don't have to stare at me doing documentation research on Circle and AWS and their capabilities there. I might even go ahead and like pre-populate some of the secrets so that I don't have to muck with that on the stream. But to outline my flow that I'm thinking in my head in case I don't show any of this stuff on stream is usually these CI tools. I know Travis has this feature, Circle CI definitely has this feature. I'm sure others have similar features. They let you go into your settings for your job or your project and configure secret environment variables that you want to have. So if I need to install AWS CLI tools to interact with my AWS account, I can go to my AWS account. I can generate credentials that are specific to Circle CI so that they don't have access to the whole world of my AWS account. And I can put in the secret key and the access ID, whatever AWS calls them, as environment variables, secret environment variables in the job. And then when I use the AWS commands, there's like AWS CLI has an S3 command, if I recall correctly, to do the actual uploading of the package that I'm building to my specified AWS S3 bucket. It will use the credentials that are stored in the secret environment variables for the job. And from that information, it should have all the authentication stuff and authorization stuff that it needs in order to actually do the upload. I'll do a good bit of that offline. I'll make sure that I have a bucket defined. I'll have credentials done, and then I'll actually save the actual AWS configuration setup for the next stream so that we can kind of close that loop. And then it'll be the other half of this equation. Like this is just the production half. Then it will be going into deployment and modifying the deployment process, or I guess for now, extending the deployment process. I'm not ready to like cut over completely, but extend the deployment process to actually download this executable as part of the deploy. I want to get as far as like reaching out to the S3 bucket and pulling it down during the deploy, letting all the other stuff do what it does today, but that will get us the ability to go into the staging environment, which I have as a virtual machine on my computer, so we can SSH in there and see that it's pulled down an actual zip app, and then we can try executing that on the Linux side and see if it actually runs as we want. If it is running as we want, then the real work begins to actually integrate it into deployment. Make sure that what I want to do is all this work would be on staging. Make sure that it takes over the deployment stuff from the old method, and then after that I start paring away the old. So that's the flow. Like I want to do this in a way that has a seamless transition. So at no point do I have a non-working deployment. There is going to be a cutover somewhere along the way, but if I keep both systems going, and kind of like in the short term increase the length of my deployment time, I think in the long term I have a safer path to doing that upgrade. Okay, so it succeeded. Let's take a look at this last job. So that seemed to do that. And this is cool. There it is. Conductor 553. .pyc. So that is definite success. So we definitely generated the PYZ on CI. So I think that brings us to the end of the stream for this evening. Next stream will not be next week. I'll be coming back from PyCon, and my flight is that Wednesday, and I'd rather spend my time with my wife than visiting with you all after being gone for a week. Sorry. Deal with it. So that's where we're going to end. We'll pick up in a couple weeks on uploading files to S3 and then get into the deployment process. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me on Twitter. I'm MB Layman over there, same as my GitHub. I'm obviously here on Twitch, so if you found this stuff useful, give me a follow so you'll know when I'm streaming in the future. I will also take this stuff and upload the video to YouTube, so if you want to refer back to something I did in the process, you're welcome to use that as a resource and ask me questions over there too. I'm pretty responsive on all of these social media channels. If you think there are things about the stream that I could change that you would like to see better, again, hit me up in a comment somewhere and I'll see what I can do trying to make this as best we can. So thank you for joining in tonight, and I will see you all later. Have a good night.